Yo, 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 what is going on, CoD Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are going to be talking about how can you best prepare your kingdom in Season 1 for Season 2. Now, for simplistic purposes, we're going to be mainly focusing on unions, or essentially if your kingdom is unified / you have multiple alliances that you're going to be allying with and you plan to partner / team up with going into Season 2. However, some of the points we touch on will also be applicable even if you are just an individual alliance when it comes to good practices that you could and or should be implementing prior to your next season. Now, bear in mind, generally speaking, this is not going to be just for Season 2. This can also be for future seasons as well. It's just that Season 2 is going to be the first season where you're basically encountering your forced KvK, merge with other kingdoms, so that's why we say that as the starting point. Let's get to number 1, which is, and this is simply enough, identifying whether or not your kingdom is unified. Meaning, how many alliances do you have that plan to go in together? Is everyone going in together? Is it just 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alliances, whatever it may be? Trying to figure that out so you can know what your numbers need to be and all of the involved parties for who those should be is really important, right? You don't necessarily want to accidentally leave out an alliance or leave out an officer, leave out a leader. So kind of doing your due diligence and taking a tally, even though you probably more or less already know what that will be before the season ends, given how the timeline and the history and the relationship building has been going in Season 1. But that is something important to take note of. Number 2, make sure that you have a Kingdom Discord. Now, yes, you could have other means if maybe you want to have a Facebook group or WhatsApp or whatever else it may be. However, I do strongly recommend having a Kingdom Discord. And I'll be making a separate video on this for how to actually build a Kingdom Discord, things you would want in there as kind of a baseline, and then other channels that would be very relevant and important. But the main part and takeaway here is that you should have a Kingdom Discord. And I'll just give you this tidbit here when it comes to that. I strongly believe that if you are going to have a Kingdom Discord, alliances need to have their separate Discords. Please do not have multiple alliances within your Kingdom Discord and then you're just separating people based on rules and permissions. And I'm going to give you the number 1 reason why I recommend to steer away from this is because if you're in a situation where you end up having multiple people with permissions that are able to see everything, whether it's an admin perm or they just have the ability to toggle on and off, that's where you start kind of getting into this invasion of privacy or just separation, because one alliance should not have access to another alliance information. And typically, if you're someone who's setting up the Kingdom Discord, most of the time it's probably a leader excuse me, of an alliance. And therefore, even if you are trying to keep yourself away from looking into other chats, it's one of those things where you just do not even want to put yourself in that position for that to be some type of worry or some type of, what's the word I'm looking for, right? Not baiting, but temptation. Yes, some type of, that's the word. Always funny when the light bulb goes off and you're like, yes, I found the right one. Temptation. So my recommendation, because this is, I'll tell you, this is what I do. For all of my projects, I always tell everyone the Kingdom Discord is for management, it's for all the players, but your individual Discords are where you guys can organize yourselves individually, have your own meetings, and etc. Set yourselves up for raids, have your own voice calls and things like that outside of what we do as a community as a whole. So that's my recommendation there. Number 3, setting up voice channels. This is something that's really important to do, and I recommend having multiple voice channels, especially for going into Season 2, because you're really going into more of a warlike state. So, and then you can kind of just have the flexibility of using multiple voice channels if needed. Maybe you have one for each alliance, maybe you have one for everyone that's fighting in war, and then you have one for management. Oh man, coming on strong right now. I thought I got decent sleep. But it is important to have, I think, some variety, even if at the end of the day you just want to use one. You could even have a stage channel, as an example, where you have a stage channel that's just for the members of the alliances, and those players can join the stage channel where you can have more than 99, and then you just have the speakers as the leaders and officers, right, from those multiple alliances, or the kind of on-field generals, right, who's ever really kind of navigating people, so to speak. And then it's also important to have real-time war channel. So you should have kind of a real-time war feed, But then you should also have an announcement channel that is specifically where people understand that, look, you're probably going to get quite a few pings here, and set that expectation early. But again, try to have your posts be relevant. And I'm going to give you a pro tip here, and I'll probably do more of a deep dive on this at a later time because I think there is good etiquette when it comes to Discord pinging and what it's like to be at war. You don't necessarily need to ping every single time where it's, oh, get online now, or get online or we're going to lose this flag, or, you guys got 5. I mean, again, try to make your pings and your posts relevant where it's more than just a one line or a few words, right, that you're sending. I can't tell you how often I see those types of posts, and I just think to myself, man, how you're just sending a subject line as a mail header and you're not giving any context, description, instructions, explanation, any types of tips. What's the focus right now? What's the main priority, secondary priority? I mean, again, you can still ping people more often than you normally would, but at the same time, not to an extreme amount where you still are allowed to have some level of body to the message that you're sending without it being incredibly short, like a tweet, so to speak. Okay, then we're going to get to number 4, excuse me, which is also, and this is kind of a branch of number 3, it's important to have in-game group chats that are set up. So you would want to go in and set up your in-game group chats where you add everyone you need to add, right? And then I would go here, I would select, I have all my friends added, right? So I'd add all the people that I need to, and then I would do okay, I rename my group chat, and then I would recommend pinning those group chats, right? So if I want, I could do this, right? Where you basically hold this and you scoot it off to the side. And you see the star, that basically pins it to the top. And then it'd be cool if you could move the pins in order. I don't think you can. So you kind of have to pin it. You have to kind of pin them as the first one is at top. Next one will be the second. Next one will be third. I think that's how it works. Watch, we can test that. So you'll see here. All right, then Bellerin chat. Oh, never mind. So the new pin, it becomes the new top one. Okay, so there we go. But the idea being is that it's good to have group chats specifically. I would say have a specific group chat that is just for war, right? Whether it's war notifications, it's war pings, it's a regular war chat. Do not get comfortable using your alliance chat as your one and all basket of Robins, come get your 37 flavors, however many they have, chat, where it's just everything and anything that can be talked about in there. Learn to compartmentalize certain topics on other types of chats. Excuse me. Next, let's get to number 5, which is Discord meetings. This is something that's really important. If you are going to be in war, you need to be having constant meetings because it helps people be aligned or to get aligned and on the same page when it comes to what's happening, what happened before, what's the plan today, how are we going to instruct, what should people be doing when they come online, even if it's just passive or if it's active play. These are important things to do. So my recommendation is you should have 3 types of meetings, ideally, depending on how often you want to spread them out. You should have meetings where it's just R5s. You should have meetings where it's management meetings. That's R5s and R4s, officers and leads. And then you should have everyone meetings. Now, the everyone meetings don't necessarily need to be daily, right? You can maybe do these every 2 or every 3 days during wartime. Maybe you just want to do them once a week and you just kind of want to give weekly updates. It really depends on your community. Right, I've seen kingdoms where they'll do meetings every day. I've seen communities where they do it every 2 to 3 days. I've seen them where they've done it 5, 6, or 7 days apart. But then they'll have more like R5s and management meetings more frequently because when you're in wartime, it's really important, more so for management, to be up to date on what's happening because it's easier for them to then go and disseminate information versus trying to gather everyone in the kingdom to come and make meetings throughout a week. Just kind of harder to organize a larger body compared to a smaller, more refined group. Then we get to number 6, which I think is incredibly important. This is what you would do when it comes to identifying your generals or your on-field leaders. These are the individuals who are going to be either in voice-giving instructions on the field with their units, giving instructions or giving directions or indicators to the other players that are there fighting. Number 2, all right, making sure you identify these individuals. One of the ways you can do that is by going off of your experience with these players, seeing kind of who's involved, who's engaged the most, right, who has decent fighting capabilities, right, who can kind of stay out on the field as long as possible. There's some other kind of unique approaches to this, but the general way is just having someone who can be there, right, regardless if their units are always on the field and with the understanding that, yeah, maybe their units might die, but being able to be an on-field presence, whether that's someone who is able to constantly be typing in chats, if they're on voice calls, right? Usually to me, being on a voice call as much as possible and or being able to give instructions in chats, potentially set markers, these are really important things to do, regardless if your units are able to sustain and last as long as possible on the field or not. But figuring that out is really important. The next one, which I think is number 7, is scouting. So scouting, I would say, is just as equally as important because you need to be able to scout out your opponents. I'll give you some examples of some things that I believe are really good to pay attention to when you are scouting. Some of those include activity times, right? What's the online, offline times for certain players and or maybe the alliance or the force that you're going up against. This can really help if you track this over a 24-hour period so you can start gauging what's the general activity level. This does require essentially someone to really be paying attention to how many units are on the field, unique player names for units that are on the field at a given time across a 24-hour period. So you might have to set up a team of maybe 2, 3, or 4 people that can do this, preferably ones that operate in different time zones so you can kind of cover a 24-hour window. This is where you would probably use something like a spreadsheet. You're going to be a little bit more meticulous, and you're going to try and document/capture as much of this data as possible because it can really help. Some things that can really benefit from this data collection would be knowing the amount of T5 players that are online at specific average times, whether it's a Monday through Friday during the week or a Monday through Thursday versus a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, right? Just knowing that can be so incredibly helpful to planning certain things out. Being able to scout who are the talkers, right? Who are the people that are really motivating? Who are the people that are constantly out there, right? Are the officers really involved? Or are there R5s really involved, depending on if it's one alliance or multiple alliances that you're going up against? Sometimes you can use that information to potentially target specific individuals to try to get them out of the fights early because that might be somewhat of a disruption. These are just, again, I'm not giving you everything, but these are some things that you would look out for on how you would go about finding or utilizing, right, the data that you could potentially capture. Then we get to number 8, I think this is diplomacy. I can't really stress, I'll say, how important diplomacy is. It is almost of probably the utmost importance when it comes to how you are able to put yourself in a position to either be at an advantage, breaking even, or at a disadvantage. And this, I recommend having someone who has good soft skills, someone who is good at speaking to people, remaining calm and neutral, mature, has a professional level of decorum that they carry themselves with, are able to hopefully speak with a level of candor, if you will, and really just a people person. Right, someone who kind of can remain calm as a cucumber, is familiar with everything that they need to know with your own landscape versus the potential landscape you're going up against. And then what are the goals, right? Are you trying to have a kind of a fair fight, power versus power? Are you trying to put yourself in a position where you have a little bit more power? Do you maybe want to be somewhat of the underdogs because you just think, hey, this would be fun for us to go up against a lot of people? You kind of have to figure out what your game plan is. Then you go ahead and you start compiling your information, making sure this individual or individuals are up to speed prior to then going out and conducting diplomacy, right? It's not just, hey, let's go out and talk to people. You really have to have a good lay of your land. And that's why I said your land, not lay of the land, lay of your land first, and then having an understanding of, right, the entire landscape before you're going out there and having conversations. Number 9 is audit activity times. This is really important. Probably one of the most important things that you'll ever do if you really want to be what I would consider professionally organized and structured. Doing activity checks where you are going out, but really it's more of you're capturing what the average activity windows are and times that players can be available. And this is across a 7-day period. So really, if you want to do it the right way and the best way, what you need to do is create a templated message that you can copy and paste, and then you'd send that as a DM in-game to every single player in every single alliance that's part of your union. You put these on individual tabs per alliance on a spreadsheet, then you have a master sheet that will cover, or a master tab on a spreadsheet that will basically pull the data, or you can input it manually, where you are able to collect and figure out what are your average times that players are able to be on, right? And you can just use this as like a UTC format, going from 0 all the way to 24, and you kind of break it up every hour. And then you can do graphs or charts, whatever it may be, to kind of figure out what are your peak online and offline times on average. Now, again, this is not going to be incredibly accurate because you always have to take into consideration anything can happen, right? This is why you ask for general averages to try and get as close of an idea, because anything can happen in someone's life. You don't know, right? Again, they could be sick, have to go pick up a kid, maybe they have to go to an appointment, maybe a friend came in from out of town. You have no idea, right, what could happen. But it is good to try and capture and acquire, or really establish, is what we should say, a baseline of information. Then the next one is going to be auditing Season 2 fighting capabilities. And what I mean by this is figuring out what tier level of troops and how many of those tier level of troops do players have unlocked. For example, do you have 3 T5 units unlocked? Do you have T5 archers? Do you have T5 mages? Do you have T5 flying or celestials? Right? What do you have? How many troops do you currently have at arguably the T5 and T4 level? Because I would imagine maybe most people probably have some T3s and T2s and T1s. But really, I would say focusing on the T4 and T5, it would be great if you could still capture the remaining data. But I would say at bare minimum, that's really what you're looking for initially. And then from there, right, how many troops? What are the tier levels of troops? Right, or do you think you'll be at T4 at a T5 unlocked by the time a certain milestone hits, right? Because then you can kind of know what the future fighting capability capacities will be. And then from there, you can kind of figure out, okay, well, which one of the T5 players? Do you guys have max VIP? Do you have certain max heroes that are leveled up, right? If we ever need to do rallies, trying to figure out what your rally commanders or rally compositions or players would be on passes, whether it's attacking or defending. Figuring out who can be more kind of on-field tanks, on-field mages, right? If you want to try and set up, for example, like celestial flying battalions. I mean, whatever, right? Let your creative juices flow. But being able to figure out this information can be incredibly helpful to getting to a point where you can have those capabilities. Then we get to the next one. Template mails and DMs for members. This is incredibly important. Before you start fighting, you need to have template mails already established and DMs already established for varying situations. This can range from anything from educational mails to tips and tricks to compositions to war strategies to if you're going to DM people for potentially just kind of heads up times that you're going to be online, but you're going to kind of limit information that you're going to send out there as a way to kind of test the waters and see what your fighting capabilities are. If you just tell people, hey, let's get online at this time, right, we're going to get a bunch of action without kind of giving them all the information. I mean, there's a lot of reasons that you can do this. Or if, hey, you guys are going to plan a big push, right? Maybe you just want to get a tally of, hey, how many people can be online at this time in a day or two or something like that. Or if you say, hey, well, out of these 2 or 3 times, right, which ones can you make if we want to plan a big offensive in a day or in 24, 48 hours from now? I mean, there's really a lot of uses for having templated messages already drafted because it saves you a lot of time. Then let's get to the next one, which is using emojis or text reactions, right, for war. I'm actually a big fan of this, where I really would actually, I'd love to see this utilized a lot more, but the simple version is like if you go here, you go to emojis, and you basically look for specific emojis here that are either here or quick chats that you can use as an indicator, right? As an on-field action that you're providing to everyone else, right? Because the assumption is that not everyone is probably going to be available to do voice calls, right? Even though you might get quite a few, especially if it's during the weekday, you just may not be able to get as many as you may think, right? And so having a way that players can operate in-game when it comes to utilizing these specific chats especially if you are someone that everyone kind of knows, hey, this is the on-field person, right? Kind of a way to almost uniquely position. Like, for example, let's say you have a flying celestial unit, right? That's doing nothing but just running speed, right? So it's like a max speed unit, but that one unit that you use out of your 5 marchers is your directional unit, right? That's the one that can maneuver over terrain. It focuses completely on speed, so the likelihood of it sustaining and lasting as long as possible is a lot higher than if you had an infantry unit, as an example, right? Or something else. And the other benefit is that if it's flying, it can go over terrain, right? So you may not get locked into a choke point or into a funnel area or stuck as often, right? Even if you try to run like a fast cav unit. And again, just using this as an example, right? A way to figure out how you can communicate in a more effective and efficient way with as many people as possible, but then explaining to them, this is what these reactions mean, right? As one thing. Then the next one is, this is the last one I'll give you, which is practice sessions. I cannot tell you how important it is. And yes, people might think, man, what are we doing, training for the Olympics? Listen, Lindas, you can, and all my Karens out there, you can have such an amazing level of organization, of structure, of comfortability, of confidence when you practice these things. And I'll just give you one example. Let's say you say, hey, we're going to have a practice day on a weekend, right? Because again, you have to also think about the days that you're going to do these things, right? It's probably better to try these things on a Saturday, Sunday versus a Monday through Friday, because it's just more likely that more players from your alliances are often to be available in a larger spread. And so you'd say, hey, we're going to do something for just 30 minutes or an hour at the most, right? Again, you don't want it to have to take too long, right? You have to try and be efficient with your time and keep the time as low as possible, right? And then try to deliver as much as possible as you can. So you say, hey, we're going to take 30, 60 minutes. And we want, and what you could do is you could kind of draw either a map or do a video, have people watch that or read it before. And then that way, when you get to your practice session, everyone has an idea of what we're doing. And then hopefully you can have someone record that, and then basically have people run through it. Like, hey, I want everyone to bunch up. And then when we say 3, 2, 1, we want everyone to spread out in a line along here, right? So we can work on, again, is constantly establishing lines, right? And any position that we are, right? Then maybe you go to different areas of the map to work on that. Thinner choke points, wider choke points. If you have flying, if you have some cav as an example, right? How can you do these? Then you work on, okay, well, if we have multiple different unit types out there, let's see about how quickly can we get into a formation, right? Where we have infantry, we can have cav, then we can have archers, mages, celestials a little bit wider, right? Something to that extent, right? Or maybe you push the cav all the way to the edges so that way they can kind of have the widest entry points to get in and get around, whatever it may be, right? These are things that you can practice. Another example is practicing on creating staging areas, right? So if you have to fall back or ever retreat in a situation, how do you create pocketed staging areas where that can kind of be your first hoop or your first area in case you're able to get enough people that can gather there to where you can either have more units and then you can do a counterattack, or if you know what, hey, we don't have enough people here yet, let's now fall back to the next staging area, right? And then we'll do the counter push. Doing those types of practices so people can just be familiar with, one, what do they visually look like? Because being able to see something being done and then say, oh man, I get it now. That can be so amazing for people when they can get a visual idea of how that looks, but also how it feels when they're moving their units around, being a part of it. Personally, I just feel like you get so much more out of something like that versus, okay, I'm just going to get some text instructions or I'm going to watch a video on it. And don't get me wrong, that's great. But if you can really immerse yourself and engage yourself, of course, pending you have the availability and the time, because not everyone will, that to me is so much more impactful and enjoyable to building a level of confidence with your average player base versus if you're not doing any of those things at all or even trying to. So with that in mind, that is going to do it for me. I actually didn't expect for this to be almost 25 minutes, but I hope that you enjoy this video on Season 2 and beyond preparation for your kingdom as a whole. And of course, if there's anything else, and bear in mind, I didn't really go over everything, but I kind of wanted to go over what I consider to be a lot of big highlight points. If there's anything else that you are doing or have done that you have found to be useful and beneficial for your kingdom, your union of alliances, or an individual alliance, let us know in the comments down below. That is going to do it for me. And then, of course, lastly, I want to hear, if you are a kingdom that did these things, how and like, for example, let's say you've played in a kingdom that didn't do these things, and then you've also been in a kingdom that did do these things. What did you notice? Was it night and day? Did you feel like, man, it was just so much better that we did this, and you personally as an individual had a better playing experience that really captured your heart and your passion to be more invested into the game? I'd love to know. So let me know down there below. That's going to do it for me. As always, until next time, I will catch you later.